everybody, welcome back to another Tale of the Tines with Field to Food. Tonight, we're going through Kyle Thompson's deer, which we had a little bit of backstory on off camera, and I'm not going to dive into it too much, but this segment is just us talking about deer that we have harvested and then got taxidermied, and it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's a story that you love telling, which I'm sure is pretty much all of our stories.
Any hunter ever.
Yep. So, floor's yours, bud. Go for it.
Shot him in 2020. 2020 was a rough year for me in the woods.
That was a rough year for the world.
Yeah. More importantly. But, no, I started off bow season, I missed a buck super early. And then 2020, there toward end of October, Dad has a heart attack in the hospital.
Yeah.
So, kind of dealing with that. And then, work schedule, everything. Didn't get to hunt as much as I wanted to. So 2020 was the first year since 2008, which was my first year bow hunting, that I didn't kill a deer with a bow.
Okay.
And normally don't hunt gun season. I was like, well, I got to this year. I got to do something. Hunted a little bit with a gun after work when I could. And then on the weekend, nothing happened. And then my buddy called me. He lives south in Carrollton.
Okay.
He said, we're going out for bonus weekend. We're going to do drives. I'm all in on drives.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
Expected more people. There was 3 of us. Okay.
Tough drive.
Makes the drive a little challenging.
Yeah.
So, kind of going over where we're going to go. I've never hunted down there before, so they're kind of giving me the lay of the land. And my buddy's like, well, I'll walk down. It's like where we were pushing out was the road was here. He was going to walk from the road, go up a hill. There's a giant flat that's thick enough to beat the band. And then another giant hill coming down to a ravine.
Yeah. So this is the December bonus weekend.
Yes, this is that. What did it say on the back? 1220.
1220.
So he's like, just get up here about halfway up that hill. I'm like, well, where exactly at? And as soon as I say that, 3 does come squirting out and they run. He's like, oh, right there, where they ran through.
Yeah.
That's the best spot. I'm like, okay. And he starts the day off with, hey, there's one buck in here I don't want you to shoot. He's super wide, but he's got short tines. If you see him, don't shoot him.
Okay.
He's super young. I was like, all right, fair. I'm hunting with you. I'll abide. Drive starts, and what's the first deer I see?
Probably the one you can't shoot.
Yeah.
Walks 30 yards broadside on a drive, just walks directly past me, jumps the fence, walks through the field, and I'm like,
Stopped and checked some
He
emails.
was 40 yards away listening to that conversation.
Oh, 100%.
He's like, oh,
I'm
that
safe
guy's
for
safe.
today.
So I'm like, this is how this whole day is going to go. I'm going to be surrounded by deer that Dave doesn't want me to shoot.
Yeah.
Well, it's fine. At least I'm out here. I'm having fun. And I watch him top the hill behind me and go out of sight, and I look up, and there's just a brown mass on the top of this knoll. I'm like, there's no way that's deer.
Mm-hmm.
I turn the power down on my scope, I look up, and there's got to be 20 deer on top of this hill just standing in a pile.
Really?
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I see a couple small bucks, a couple fork horns, a couple 6 points, and then I see him. And I'm like, that's a big buck. And just then, Dave's cousin shoots, and they just break.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of amazing to see all the does ran down the fence line, and all the bucks jumped the fence. They were all in a weird order, but all the does went down, all the bucks went across.
Okay.
I had already seen him. I was like, well, he's the nicest one in the group. And he was the only buck that hesitated jumping the fence.
Okay.
Every buck cleared it, and he came up to it and stopped.
He said, I'm not doing that.
Yep. I shot him 8 yards with a 450 Bushmaster.
Oh,
Yikes.
good Lord.
And
That's what
I told you,
said.
I told you guys this, but you said your buck dressed out, what, 288?
Yeah.
This buck dressed out 80, I think 86 pounds.
That is wild.
So I saw that. I'm picturing at least 200-pound deer.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there like, I just smoked a 140.
Yeah.
And one of the first things Dave said was, don't shoot any like basket racks.
Okay.
And I walk up and I'm like, oh, dude, he's super baskety.
Uh-oh.
My Dave's going to be so mad at me. But, I mean, he wasn't like severely run down from the rut.
Mm-hmm.
When we cleaned him, he was, just covered in fat. He was just
Just
a small deer. I mean,
Run to
you
the
can see
buck.
by the size of his skull. That's the smallest skull out of all my European.
That's a tiny skull.
It is. It was super. Like, he would fit on your tailgate lengthwise.
No kidding.
He was that small.
Did you have him aged?
No, I didn't get him aged. First, I was like, maybe he's super young.
I can't tell by teeth.
I can't either. The one thing that differs from up here to down there is, for some reason, like up here, our deer have super long noses, or old does do.
Mm-hmm.
Down there, they don't.
Stubby.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's like one of the things I use to age a doe with. I'm like, oh, you can tell by the
Yeah.
length of her nose. She's got that big Roman nose to her.
Yep.
Down there, I'm like, there's one lone doe in a field. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
So I don't know numbers and weights with deer. Like saying 180 doesn't mean a whole lot to me. So I'm picturing like this ball of a deer,
German Shepherd kind of thing.
like a fat.
Just a butterball of a buck.
So
Right.
we'll go over how big all the deer are.
I would say your buck from muzzleloader last year was 200. So for this deer to be dressed out at 85,
Yeah.
that's a baby deer.
So when you guys say wet, like
That's
That's the
antlers.
antlers.
We're talking about
Oh.
weight.
Yeah.
well, what's the wet?
Yeah.
Wet is when you measure it like it's fresh, like you just killed it.
There's a dry time with antlers before you could have it scored and it count towards any kind of scoring system.
Do they shrink?
Yeah.
Not much.
Not much. I mean, it's
but they do.
8% or 3, but
No, hold
Yeah.
the standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of this little fat deer. Like, oh my god, 180 pound deer.
But for a 3-man drive, we'd plan hunting the whole day.
Yeah.
Killed 4 deer.
That's incredible. That's a good day.
It was. So we
That
were
was
like,
a good day.
we spent more time gutting and dragging than we did actually. It was a 20-minute push
Oh yeah.
on like maybe a 10-acre piece.
Yeah.
One guy just going through the thick stuff.
Yeah, you probably had 4 hours from start to finish for.
Well, we got
all
lucky
deer.
because his dad pulled up with a side by side with a cart.
Oh,
It
good.
was like, throw him in the cart, get back out there. We're all kind of like, man, we don't really need any more.
Yeah.
We're all kind of done.
I'd be halfway through deer 3 and be like, yeah, these coyotes are hungry too.
yeah.
But it was. I like that deer because that's the first deer I've killed with a gun. I don't know how many years. And that's the last deer I killed with a gun, 2020.
Huh.
And it was a super hard season. It paid off, a cool buck. He's not super wide, but for how big he is, he's got decent mass going all the way up. He's got long tines for how big he actually was. But then I got to hunt with some good friends, and we had a really successful day on something that really didn't sound like it was going to be too successful.
Yeah.
So it's one of my favorite deer.
It's so hard to age a deer on a Euro mount, especially not having the bottom jaw.
Right,
But
yeah.
I'm trying to study this thing the best I can, and my guess would be 3, 4.
Kind of, I was thinking 3.
3?
I mean,
He's not 2.
no.
I think you're definitely right. He as he was getting older, he wasn't going to get much bigger than this.
Yeah.
I think this is where he was.
Yeah, ton of ground shrinkage, but
It happens to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've done it. Like, are you sure that wasn't the same deer I just shot?
like, who shot this one? This isn't mine.
I really enjoy it when it works the other way, when you're up in your tree stand and you wind up deciding to pass on a buck because he doesn't look quite mature enough, and then he turns, or just you get a different look at him,
Oh,
and you're
man.
like, oh, what a mistake that was.
Yup, yup.
And it's too late. He's either walking away or he's too far away. I did that probably 10 years ago. Really nice 8-point came in at 10 yards broadside, and I'm 25 feet up in this tree, and he looked okay. I was trying to age him. I figured he was probably 3.5, 4.5.
Yeah.
Antlers were a decent 8-point, and then like, you know what, first or second day of the hunt, I'll let him walk. And then as soon as he got in front of my tree, he turned 90 and walked straight downhill
got
from
to
me, and
see
I
the spread.
realized how wide he was.
You're like, oh crap.
Oh no, this is gonna haunt me forever. And 10 years later, I'm still thinking about it.
That was just one of those, like, just the classic hunts he had. Was super fun, a lot of camaraderie.
Yeah.
And we talked about deer drives a few times on the show.
And group hunts is just
Yeah.
so much more fun.
And for walking in and being, oh, there's only 3 of us,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, well, maybe we might get lucky today and get one. And then you end up with 4.
Yeah.
On a small parcel too.
Yeah.
So, how much of a rager was camp when you had 4 deer down in the same day?
Camp was over. We all went home.
Oh, okay.
We were like, well, we don't really need to stay.
There would not be a beer safe in that county
No.
if
No.
we had a camp going.
No.
I was
Everybody shot
home
deer.
before dark that day. Everyone else was like, well, I guess there's no point. We all can just get out of here.
Yeah, I suppose.
And
Was
like
that anyone's first?
first,
hunt?
no,
They don't.
no. My buddy Dave's been hunting down there on the same property for his whole life, and then his cousin's been hunting with him too.
That would've been
We were
bad.
expecting my buddy Dave's brother, but something came up and he couldn't show up. And he was like, well, I guess we're gonna make the most of it. And then as we were like getting all the deer rounded up, Steve showed up and he's like, looks like I missed a good day. We're like, yeah, you missed a great day, buddy.
Well, that's a good point of the story is also that if you have the opportunity to go, just because it's not the ideal setup or the ideal wind
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever, go anyways.
I mean, I got invited to hunt a beautiful piece of property with good friends, and like, you can't really say no to that.
No, especially right around Christmas and having a tough time with your dad and stuff. Like
Yeah.
you needed that escape.
Yeah, there was actually I seen a giant buck that year, and it was actually the night my dad went to the hospital, and I didn't think anything of it. Just like little side note, Dad had a heart attack for a week before we did anything about it.
Stubborn man.
Oh yeah,
Good lord.
and I remember the night I went over to hunt. He texted me, he's like, "I'm not hunting tonight. It's too hot." It was like, I think it was October 22nd. It was like 80 degrees. And I was like, "Well, the wind's perfect for me, so I'm gonna go."
Yeah.
And I get there and he's like, I don't feel good. I'm gonna go inside and take a shower. And by the time we had that conversation, I walked back to my stand where you saw way down in that bottom corner, maybe a 10-minute walk. My mom was like, I'm taking your dad to the hospital. I was like, good. I was like, he looks rough.
He doesn't look good.
And then that night, right before like that last half hour, small buck busted out behind me. I was like, there's no way he winded me. There's no way he saw me. The wind's coming from that direction where they're coming from. There's no way. And then I just hear the footsteps, and I can see a silhouette through the brush. And this giant 10-point comes out. I'm like, oh, man, that's a nice buck.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, man, like 45 yards. Crosses the creek, and he just sticks his head out, and he's just looking around. I'm like, okay. And he starts to walk away. So I'm like, I grunt. He wants nothing to do with it. Grunt louder. Wants nothing to do with it. So I was like, well, last ditch effort. I've never tried a snort wheeze. Hit him with a snort wheeze, and he turned on a dime.
Really?
So fast, he ran into 20 yards. So fast, I didn't even have time to grab my bow. I'm just standing there. He's just looking. I'm like, I didn't do anything.
I
I'm screwed.
That is one of those tricks. I've had countless deer completely ignore a grunt call, ignore a rattle sequence. I couldn't tell you how many deer I've snort wheezed at, but let's say it's 10. 9 of them have turned on a dime.
Really?
And come in. It is one of those tricks that if you know how to do it or you have a call to do it, do not let that sit in your pocket.
Oh, yeah.
Use it because it works.
Do you guys have a call for it?
No, I just do it with.
I have my grunt call has like a little tube on the
We
top.
can hear it.
I've never had a standalone snort wheeze actually work.
Really?
I've had a combination with rattling work, but at that point, I don't know which is which. But I've never had a standalone. Actually,
I'm the other way.
Really?
I think I've rattled in maybe 2 bucks my whole life. I've snort wheezed from a distance. I don't know how many.
I'm the same way.
10 or more.
I don't know. I don't know if I just suck at using my rattle bag, or if you're so used to hearing it
Right.
that they don't should pay much attention to it, or if it's just not something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I still carry my rattle bag with me. I think just for nostalgia.
Yeah.
But I will sooner use a snort wheeze when I'm active calling a deer. I can see him. I'm not cold calling.
Yep.
I will use a snort wheeze 100% of the time over my rattle bag.
Really?
Actually, this very same year after that encounter, I think a couple times after that, I went out. I had a small buck come in, and he's about 40 yards. And I was like, well, let's see if that works again. And I snort wheezed, and he'd come by and do laps. I got him to come back 9 times on snort wheezes.
Wow.
It is.
As soon as he would go to leave, I'd
I
hit
think
it
I'm
again.
snort wheezing wrong.
As soon as he would go to leave and go back into the brush, I would snort wheeze again. And he would never stop. He would be on a walk. I'd snort wheeze. He would just turn and go right back in.
So I don't rattle in a tree. I'll make a point to get that out there because you know how you're at home and the kids or the wife is calling you from a different room. You know by the sound of her voice and the echo of the house what room that was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think deer know that too.
Oh, absolutely.
I think an elevated rattle is so obvious.
I've grunted at deer from across being in cornfields 200 yards away, and they lock eyes with me through my binos.
It's crazy how well they can play sound.
And it's not just deer. Turkeys are the same way. You could be calling to a turkey. The turkey's up on his roost, and you're 150 yards away, and he will come to the base of your tree.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to get that turkey to come off the roost and to you, he will come to the base of that tree that you're leaning on.
Mine normally hang up at 50 and start laughing at me.
Mine come in behind a briar patch at 7 yards and peek through with one eyeball and go, "Gotcha!"
I'm not made for kind of turkey.
Gosh.
Well, I want to hit the standing questions before we wrap this up.
Yep.
You had no history with this deer.
No, that was the first time I hunted that property with them. That was the first time I was invited. And I usually go down maybe once or twice every year.
So did they have history, like photos?
I think after the fact, going through his photos, there was some pictures of him. And he was like, that wasn't one we were interested in yet because they thought he was like, they said the same thing. Look at his body size. He's young.
Yeah.
But then they were like, I think he's a year and a half. And I was like, that's a year and a half old man. I screwed up so bad.
I don't think he's a year and a half.
Yeah, I think he's older. I think he just got a goofy small one.
Yeah, I said he had his skull's super small, his body, and everything about him was tiny. But I guess, first I was like, oh, he just ran down from the rut. And then when I went to skin him and clean him, his whole hinds were encased in fat. All up the back was fat. I mean, his hinds probably had an inch thick of fat on him.
Wow.
So I was
Especially
like,
for
okay,
that time of year.
he's not run down. He's just a small deer.
Yeah.
Side note, I've never shot a deer south of the Ohio River. The further south you go, obviously, the
Deer get smaller.
the deer get smaller, but the easier winters they have too. Well, deer down there pack on as much fat as they do up here or in Michigan. Because I've seen deer in Michigan have a lot more stored fat than deer in Ohio. I imagine that would translate down the further you go south, right?
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I don't know if I've shot a deer.
I haven't.
South of Ohio. I've shot in
North and east.
north and east.
Yeah.
A bunch, but. That's
South of the Ohio River.
I don't like hunting in heat. That's why.
Sounds like we got a trip south.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe. All right. So obviously, your first call was probably to your fellow drivers and pushers and stuff, right?
Actually, there was so much shooting going on, I didn't feel safe calling anybody.
Okay.
I mean, I shot once, and I think Dave's cousin, he had to have blown through a box of shells. It was a boom, boom, boom.
Not a good place to be a deer then.
No, he ended up getting two, and then the funny thing was, my buddy was like, I'm not shooting any. He doesn't eat a lot of deer, so he's like, I just want one, but I want it to be a nice one.
That's fair.
So he's like, I'm not shooting anything unless it's big.
Yeah.
So when I hear Dave's 444 ring off, I'm like, ooh, there was a big one in here. He walks up, I'm like, what'd you get? He's like, I got like a 90-pound doe. I'm like, what? He's like, everyone else was shooting. I wanted to join. I'm like, all right, that's fair.
That's funny.
Oh,
All right. Well, so since it's how you started the story, I guess I have to see if it's going to wrap up the same way. What was that phone call to Dad like, especially after his heart attack a month and a half prior?
That was pretty good. Yeah, he was happy. He ended up still killing a deer that year.
Of course he would.
Yep. I think 4 or 5 days after he got out of the hospital.
Good for him.
Because they were like, no heavy lifting, none of that
He's
stuff.
like,
No stairs.
Yeah.
But
So-
tree stands are fine.
I get a phone call one night. I'm actually in the backyard cleaning a buddy's deer head, and my phone rings and it's Dad. I'm like, I don't think Dad was hunting tonight. And I come like, hello. He's like, I got one. I'm like, all right, I'm on the way. He's like, don't bother. It's small and it's on the road. I was like, are you sure? He's like, I'll be fine.
Well, cool.
Oh, that's great.
All right, man. Well, congrats on the deer. That's certainly a nice one and a cool story to go with it.
Yeah.
And a heck of a mount. I like your stand.
Yeah, that's cool mount too.
Also one of a kind.
Yeah. 20 minutes, a welder, and a hammer. You can make whatever you want.
Modern blacksmith.